Hi there. I'm going to tell you a story today. Not just any story, but the life of a man whose name still echoes through history, Robert Edward Lee. He was born on January 19th, 1807 in a quiet corner of Virginia, Stratford Hall. Now picture this. A boy born into one of Virginia's most respected families, yet living under the shadow of a father who had once been a war hero, but whose glory had long faded. His father, Henry Lighthorse Harry Lee, was celebrated in the American Revolutionary War, a man admired by George Washington himself. But by the time little Robert came along, the fortune was gone. The family was struggling. His father, once so admired, was now weighed down debt and disgrace. When Robert was just 6, his father ended up in debtor's prison and later left for the West Indies, never to return. He died far away, leaving behind a family barely holding on. Robert grew up with his mother, Anne Hill Carter Lee, a woman of strength and faith. She taught him discipline, duty, and a quiet sense of responsibility. He wasn't the loud, boastful type. He was calm, serious, reserved, but there was steel beneath that quiet exterior. Even as a young man, people noticed his self-control, his determination. In 1825, at just 18, he entered West Point, the United States Military Academy. And here's something remarkable. He graduated second in his class, without a single demerit. Not one. Think about that. In a place known for its strict rules and harsh discipline, he was flawless. That tells you a lot about who he was. Focused, precise, committed. He became an officer in the Army Corps of Engineers, building forts, strengthening defenses. He wasn't famous yet. He wasn't a household name. But those who worked with him, they respected him deeply. In 1831, he married Mary Anna Randolph Custis, the great-granddaughter of Martha Washington. Their house would later become one of America's most sacred places, though neither of them could have imagined that at the time. Then came the Mexican-American War in 1846. This was where Robert E. Lee began to truly shine. He was brilliant on the battlefield, not as a commander yet, but as an engineer and strategist. He scouted enemy positions, often under fire, and found ways to outmaneuver them. At places like Cerro Gordo, Contreras, and Chapultepec, his actions helped secure American victories. General Winfield Scott, the top commander, later called Lee the very best soldier I ever saw in the field. That's not a small compliment. Lee earned respect, and more importantly, confidence in himself. Years passed. He became superintendent of West Point in 1852, shaping the next generation of soldiers, many of whom would later fight either with him or against him in a war that was coming, whether anyone wanted to admit it or not. By the late 1850s, America was breaking apart over slavery and states' rights. Lee himself had complicated views. He called slavery a moral and political evil, but he also believed it should end gradually, under God's will, not through force. He inherited enslaved people through marriage, and while he freed some, he still upheld the system in practice. This contradiction, like so many in his life, would later define how history judged him. In 1859, he led the Marines who crushed John Brown's raid at Harper's Ferry, a violent attempt to spark a slave revolt. It was a pivotal moment, a sign of how divided the nation had become. Then came 1861. The Union was falling apart. President Abraham Lincoln offered Lee command of the Union Army itself, the chance to save the nation. And here's where Lee faced the hardest choice of his life. He loved the United States. He had served it his entire career. But he could not fight against Virginia, his home. With deep reluctance, he resigned his commission, saying, "I cannot raise my hand against my birthplace, my home, my children." To the north, he became a traitor. To the south, a symbol of loyalty. He soon took command of the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia. What followed were some of the most famous battles in American history: the 7 Days, Second Bull Run, Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville. His strategies, his boldness, made him a legend. Soldiers adored him. Even his enemies respected him. But in 1863 at Gettysburg, his luck ran out. Over 3 days of bloody fighting, his army was shattered. His decision to order Pickett's charge, sending thousands of men across open ground into heavy fire, was devastating. From that point on, the Confederacy's fate was sealed, though Lee fought on with courage and determination. By 1865, the war was over. His army was exhausted, starving, outnumbered. At Appomattox Courthouse, Lee met Ulysses S. Grant to surrender. It was a quiet, solemn moment. Lee stood tall, dignified, even in defeat. Grant, showing respect, allowed Confederate soldiers to go home, taking their horses with them. Lee told his men to return to their lives and be good citizens again. It was the end of a long, bitter struggle. After the war, Lee didn't seek revenge or glory. He became president of Washington College in Virginia, guiding young men toward rebuilding their lives. He spoke of reconciliation, though he never fully embraced equality for the freed slaves. On October 12, 1870, Robert E. Lee died. He left behind a complicated legacy. To some, he was a hero of honor and duty. To others, a man who fought for a cause that defended slavery. Even today, his name stirs debate. But here's the truth. His life is America's story. Brilliant, flawed, torn between ideals and reality. To understand him is to understand a nation still struggling with its past.